Welcome back to the Deep Dive Spotlight Series. Today we're sitting down with Florida native Brady Cobb, whom is known quite well within the cannabis space. Currently serving as the CEO of Bluma Wellness, the owner of One Plant Florida, Cobb has had a storied history within the Florida cannabis market, which includes executive roles at several firms. Prior to entering the public space, he has served as an attorney within the state. We thought it'd be interesting to sit down with Brady to discuss the regulatory status of cannabis within the United States, in addition to hearing about his latest venture, Bluma Wellness, which is currently listed on the Canadian Securities Exchange under ticker symbol BWEL. Welcome, Brady. Let's start with the basics. How did you make the jump from the role of an attorney to the role of a cannabis executive?
So for me, cannabis has always kind of been in my blood. My father was a smuggler in the late 70s, early 80s here in Florida, and always knew it's something I wanted to be into. I recently did an interview with Forbes where, I first was introduced to cannabis probably too young, like 14, 15 years old. But I liked the way it made me feel. So I used my lobbying background and my lawyer background. Becoming a lawyer, I started a lawyer as a trial lawyer. So I started trying cases. I've tried 14 cases to verdict, mostly commercial cases. That gave me an idea to understand contracts. Then I went into lobbying, and it also showed me where kind of business and politics intersect. I had a chance to work for a former Senate president and run a government affairs office up in our state capital here in Florida in Tallahassee. So that when cannabis eventually showed up here in 2014, 2015 as something that was going to go on the ballot in 16, it was my opportunity. I saw it as my opportunity to utilize the skills that I'd gathered to jump into the cannabis space. My first role, though, was as the chief legal officer and the deal maker that put Liberty Health Sciences together, which was the first license to change hands in Florida. Then I went out, left them, raised capital, and went and launched this second entity, which is now One Plant Florida.
In a prior Forbes interview, you addressed that you've lobbied within the U.S. for cannabis legalization. Can you tell us a bit more about your efforts here?
Sure. So recognizing that our biggest single inhibitor for a U.S. marketplace, demographically, potential sales-wise, no disrespect to my friends in Canada, but the U.S. market is massively bigger than what anything you could see in Canada, just by pure population. There's 38, 40 million people in Canada. There's 21 million right here in Florida and growing. So recognizing that, it was about, okay, what's our biggest single impediment? What's our biggest single stumbling block? And it was this dichotomy between state law that says you can do it and federal law that still says it's Schedule 1. So I went and partnered with, kind of using my lobbying and legal background, and found the best lobby group I could in DC, which was the BGR group, which is founded and run by Haley Barber, a longtime strategist. And Haley's team helped me identify that we had a long road to hoe to get to where we wanted to go. But ultimately, DC is a game of incrementalism. So step by step. So the first thing we did when I started in 2000, I want to say it was 17, Jeff Sessions came out and immediately rescinded the Cole Memorandum. And basically declared war on cannabis on January 4th, I think it was. I remember where I was, 2017. The markets went off a cliff. And we then had to go into, okay, how do we stop that from happening? How do we deal with the Attorney General's issues? And we ultimately did it by getting the Robacher Amendment passed, which allowed, which prevented the Justice Department from taking any actions against cannabis operators as long as they were complying with state law. It was a budget rider. From there, it was literally going door to door to door within the House and the Senate for the better part of 3.5 years, probably 6 or 7 times a year. I'd go up on an early morning flight out of Fort Lauderdale, get there around 11. We'd have 20 meetings between 11 and 6, sleep for a couple hours, get up the next day, do the same thing, and catch the 8 o'clock flight home. And when we started, we couldn't get a meeting with people. This is even with Haley Barber's help, couldn't get a meeting with people that made coffee. But what I'm very proud of is by the end of it, over the last year or so, key members in both the House and the Senate are educated on cannabis. They understand the issues. They've had someone that's been impacted by it. So it was really makes you proud to walk into these offices and they're asking questions. They're educated and informed. And it's not solely because of us, but I'm very proud to have been a part of that process and continue to be a part of that process.
Where do you see regulatory reform going with respect to your home state, as well as the country as a whole? What sort of timeline are you estimating for this?
Well, if you would have told me when we started this in 16 and 17, I had it as a 10-year play to truly Because remember, each little win matters. The key for federal is stepping stone. You just want to keep moving forward. You don't want to go backwards. But a lot of stuff has happened. So we've seen a lot of the political winds change. When you see states like Ohio, Florida, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, states that are key in the Electoral College, legalize cannabis, all of a sudden it went from a tier 3 issue, what was largely, yeah, it's out in California, it's Washington, no big deal. All of a sudden you have key East Coast states that matter in a presidential election go pro-cannabis, mostly by constitutional amendment. In Florida, we were 70% of voters, 71%. So 7 out of 10 voters in Florida in 2016 supported cannabis. That was not ignored by the establishment in DC. So it's been sped up a little bit. I was very proud to see the Safe Banking Act come out of the House last year with over 91 votes, Republican votes in support of it. Our back of the napkin math had it around 40 to 45. So to see 91 happen was huge. And what's often overlooked is those 91 Republican House members voted in favor of the Safe Banking Act on the same day that they initiated articles of impeachment against the president, a Republican president. So that again speaks to that cannabis is starting to transcend some of the partisanship, and it's starting to become almost a tier 1 issue. And you've also heard both the presidential candidates, whether it's the incumbent Donald Trump or the challengers and Biden Harris, have also laid out and put cannabis at the forefront. So I think you're going to see some real change. I think that, in my opinion, if I was designing a legislative strategy or a cannabis strategy for either one of those candidates, I would say pass the Safe Banking Act right now so that you can begin, and Treasury can begin to get their arms around the size of the market. Mostly when you go meet with folks from Treasury, they want the money in banks because then you can begin to see the size of the market, potential taxation. But you can also see the money's in banks. What's the flow look like? Think about it this way. Right now, if you're a U.S. company doing business and employing U.S. workers, serving U.S. patients, you have to bank and list in Canada. List your shares publicly in Canada. If you're a Canadian company employing Canadians, selling cannabis to Canadians, you can list on the New York Stock Exchange and bank in any bank in the US. That has to be fixed. So fix the Safe Banking Act. The second thing I would say to do is don't talk about decriminalization. Don't talk about federal legalization. Both of those are going to require years of work. There's some north of 30 federal agencies that would have to touch cannabis reform from an employment standpoint, from an environmental standpoint. Instead, there's a bill that's been pending and drafted, co-sponsored by Senator Cory Gardner and Senator Elizabeth Warren, called the States Act, that I actually had a chance to help draft. That's the meaningful way, because all that bill says is if it's legal in a state and you're complying with state law, you're exempted from Schedule 1. So Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act would no longer apply. That's the cleanest, most effective way to achieve let the states handle it, which is one thing I will give Donald Trump credit for. Not a lot of things, but I'll give him credit for this, is he's acknowledged this is a state issue, just like alcohol is. In some states, alcohol is regulated one way, same as insurance under McCarran-Ferguson. It's regulated at the state level. Let it be regulated at the state level. And the States Act is the cleanest and most efficient way to do that. It's already good fanfare in the House, good fanfare in the Senate. If I was designing a strategy, get that bill passed. In Florida, we're coming along. We have a new director of the Office of Medical Marijuana Use who's been tremendous. He's building a great team. Just today, they launched edibles rules. So we've been waiting on the ability to be able to manufacture and sell edibles here in the state of Florida, and they issued the rules today. So they're making progress. I think we're going to continue to see a potential for a recreational adult use push here in Florida coming up at the next election in 2022, but there's a long time between now and 2022. I'll be happy to make it out of 2020 alive. I think anybody would right now. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
In terms of cannabis and capital markets, do you see Canada as remaining as the mecca for the industry, or are you expecting a flight of capital to the U.S. to occur?
I think you're going to see it's going to naturally move to the U.S. at some point. If the Safe Banking Act passes, that'll be a springboard for the Treasury to look at updating their FinCEN guidance. Every bank, whether they're a traditional bank or they're an investment bank, every exchange is going to be looking at what those FinCEN rules say. Because right now they're very draconian. They simply say, if it's cannabis, we can come in and close your bank. Hence, there's no U.S. cannabis companies listed anywhere because they're all violating Schedule 1. So once that happens, I think you'll see there's going to be a migration. The market's too big. And quite frankly, this is a made in America story, which we need right now. In the middle of what we have going on in this entire COVID pandemic and all the other unrest that we have, cannabis companies are one of the few companies that are hiring amidst this chaos, but are also providing something that can, let's just be real about what cannabis is, chill people out a little bit. And give them the ability to relax a little bit and to try to escape some of this. I mean, I'm homeschooling with my wife, 2 kids in virtual school right now. Trust me, a little medicine at the end of the day goes a long way. So ultimately, I think you're going to see it has to come back to the United States. There'll always be a place for the Canadian markets. They brought and created the cannabis market, but at some point it's going to transition back here to the United States.
You often talk about your excitement for the Florida cannabis market. Outside of Florida, what market do you see offering the most opportunity in the near term? And say 5 to 10 years from now.
To me, I think I'd look at those New Jersey markets. I love the Pennsylvania market and even the New York market. Big population centers, great demographics, vertical markets. So the benefit on it, I prefer a vertical market where, from a licensing standpoint, your licensing regulatory agency in California, one of the things I think they got in front of their skis on is issuing licenses to dispensary owners, issuing licenses to processors, growers, transportation companies. That's a lot of people to regulate on a very limited budget, which allows the black market and the illicit market and the underground dispensaries to kind of proliferate. The vertical market, while it does limit the amount of market entrance, does allow for companies to come in and do it the right way. Because the last thing you want is a bunch of we don't need a scarlet letter on the industry on day one. We're already cannabis. We're already a vice. There's follow the kind of the path of our peers in the alcohol industry, where there's a bunch of different manufacturers and a 3-tier system. Ultimately, is what I think is going to happen. But the Pennsylvania market, the New Jersey market, the New York market. I'm not really sold on the Massachusetts market, and I'm obviously a huge fan of the Florida market. Any type of place where there's good demographics, potential for growth, and a government that's supportive in a vertical market, I think you're going to see those markets really take off. And I think look at what happened in Illinois with what's going on in Illinois. Michigan's finding its feet, and I think you're going to see that same thing happen if adult use happens in Pennsylvania, which the Governor Wolf has signaled he wants to happen. Watch Pennsylvania as a market that's going to run.
You recently made the jump from SOL Global to that of Bluma Wellness, an investee company of SOL's. What enticed you to make the jump?
I've always wanted to be in operations. I've always wanted to run and lead a team, build a team, and build our type of a team to focus on the kind of stuff that we wanted to do in the cannabis space. One of the benefits of being the CEO of Sol is, as an investments company, I had the opportunity to go out and see a lot of operators that we invested in, see a lot of people doing a lot of things the right way, like the Veranos of the world, and then see a lot of the companies that have blown leads, not necessarily scaled up properly, brands that have not done things the right way. What that gave me the ability to do was, as I took notes and compartmentalized it in my own mind and figured out what it is I wanted to do, it gave me the opportunity to build this business the way I wanted to build it, which is a clear and succinct focus on delivering the highest quality flower that Florida has ever seen, and flower-derived products. Because as we assessed the Florida market, it was largely devoid of anyone that was doing anything with respect to product quality. It was kind of a sea of soulless cultivation facilities where they were pumping out very average cannabis. I went to California, I went to Colorado, sourced some of the best growers that I could find, people I've known in the space that were either black market or legal market guys, and convince them to move their families here on the promise of, I'll never make you grow average cannabis. We'll always be pushing the limits. So it was a great time at Sol. I enjoyed my time there. It gave me a tremendous amount of exposure to the capital markets. It gave me a tremendous amount of exposure into the cannabis industry and learning the various ways to do things the right way and not the right way. It certainly gave me thicker skin working with Andy with as much attention as he could drive sometimes with his Twitter feed. But ultimately, it gave me the opportunity to recognize that I wanted to go be an operator and build this model of efficiency and deliver results to shareholders.
What's the long-term vision of Bluma? Are you planning on focusing on select states, or are you looking to one day do a national rollout?
So for us, we're focused. I mean, I bought my team those blinders they put on racehorses so they don't look backwards. Our focus right now is building out our Florida operation. Florida is a number 2 to number 3 market in the world, depending on who you ask, which analyst you talk to. Truly just demonstrated by posting $120 million on a $470 million 2020 run rate that the market's worth around $1 billion here in Florida. So there's plenty of market share to go get. And there's only 14 licensees, only 9 of those are actually operational. So what's our focus? What's our goal? I want to have the best and highest quality cannabis in the state of Florida. and I want to deliver the most money to the bottom line. How am I going to do that? My pricing and my margins and focusing on premium allows me a lot of margin cushion for when this industry ultimately gets commercialized. Number two, we focused on delivery first and being very efficient. I didn't want to go spend a bunch of money building out stores and leasing stores, which is expensive, when we didn't have the flower quality or the flower quantity to put on the shelves. Like, so a lot of my competitors in Florida, the Harvests of the world, the MedMens of the world, had a bunch of stores open with nothing on the shelves, because in a vertical market, you're only as good as what you grow. So we were very efficient and very smart. Let's build out the delivery network. We built out our own e-commerce platform to facilitate delivery. So my goal is, I'm not going to do as much top line revenue as a Curaleaf in Florida or a True Leaf in Florida, but I want to do a comparable amount and have the highest volume and the highest grossing stores in the state, because each one of my stores has 3 profit centers: in store, curbside, and delivery. And I want to drag more money down to the bottom line than my peers, from right into net profit, because of how efficiently we operate and our price points and focusing on premium cannabis. That's ultimately our goal. And more importantly, we want to create a brand and a culture. We're all within this company. We're all cannabis enthusiasts. So it's not your traditional corporate, people from other industries that have showed up. We have a very good mix of cannabis enthusiasts and folks from the outside world. Perfect example, I've got Mike Smuts as the chief operating officer. He launched most of the first legal dispensaries in Colorado. So he knows the space inside and out. And then I have a chief commercial officer that pushes him, who comes to us from Gallo Wines and CPG, as well as comes to us most recently from Bill Foley's wine company, Foley Family Wines, as they're running those wine businesses and their P&L. So there's a perfect example of someone from outside the cannabis industry and someone from inside the cannabis industry, and we're all pushing ourselves to consistently live on the edge and have the best flower quality, but also deliver a very good P&L and balance sheet.
The final question, as we like to ask industry members and executives alike, what keeps you up at night?
Well, before the federal laws leveled out, it was guys showing up in blue jackets with yellow letters because we're all violating Schedule 1 in the cannabis industry. But now that that's out of the way and we've got a much more, a much safer regulatory environment to deal in, what keeps me up at night is actually scaling and executing properly. I don't ever want to lose sight of who we are and become a corporate suit. I've done that as a lawyer. What keeps me up at night is maintaining our integrity to our mission statement, and something that rings true with us is that our cannabis is grown, not made. So for me, it's being able to scale, but to do it our way. And that's honestly what drives me and keeps me up at night as we keep pushing, because I'm pushing my team hard every day to ramp up faster, to scale faster, to get stores open faster. And I don't ever want to lose a sense of purpose and kind of the culture and the vibe that we have, because it's a very unique thing to have in the cannabis sector, to actually have an entire team that is fully bought in. It's something I take immense pride in. I don't ever want to lose that.
Thank you so much, Brady, for joining us. And thank you guys for watching the Deep Dive Spotlights.